All right. The second type of classification of triangles is classifying them based on angles. And the way that the classification works here is that if three angles, right, it's a triangle, so if all the angles are acute, we call those triangles, yeah, believe it or not, acute triangles. So if all the angles of the triangle are acute, we call them an acute triangle. So an example would kind of look like this, where you have something that's maybe 50 over here, and 70 over here, and 60 over there. Notice all the angles are less than 90, the definition of acute. So if all three of the angles are acute, then you have an acute triangle. And then the next one is if you have two acute angles and one obtuse angle. So I'll give you an example, would kind of look like this guy over here. So let's say that this angle was 100, and then this angle over here was 25, and this angle was 55. We would say that this triangle is an obtuse triangle, All right, so we have an acute triangle. That's where all the angles are acute. We have an obtuse triangle. That's where we have two acute angles and one obtuse angle. And then we have our last type of triangle. We call this one here the right triangle. So this one right here is what we call the right triangle. And it's when you have two, and that's the symbol, by the way, for triangle. It's when you have two acute angles and one right angle. So you have one right angle over here, right? And we know that that's 90. So they can either say it's 90 or can they put the symbol right there for the box. And then you have an angle over here that looks like, maybe 50, and over here over maybe 40. And now you have a right triangle. So these right here are the three main categories or classifications for triangles based upon their angles. There's one more. If all the angles are the same, right? All congruent angles, we call that an equiangular triangle, equiangular. So you have the equiangular triangle. Okay, and that would look like this. So they'd say, oh, all the angles are congruent to each other. All right, and that is how you would classify your triangles. The next video, we'll talk about some examples of how of triangles and asking you to classify them.